How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Mardiege, here today on Wednesday, January 22nd, halfway through the week, and there's a lot of stuff to cover surrounding the NFL in regards to some playoff topics, but also some breaking news that we had today regarding the New York Jets and their future, because it was announced today that they were officially hiring Lions former defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn to be their new head coach, starting another new era in New York under the guidance of Aaron Glenn. So we're going to give our thoughts on that and go into some of the details into that move, and then we're going to go into some more coaching updates because there was some more news surrounding some coordinator positions and some future moves as well. We're going to talk some things around the playoffs as well with some open-ended questions, regarding the Bills, the Lions still, and the Baltimore Ravens and their disappointing end to their season as well. So we got a lot of things to kind of discuss in a more discussion-based episode today. So make sure to stick around to that. And before we jump into the news about Aaron Glenn, obviously, a quick reminder to you guys, if you have any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share on these live shows, to not hesitate to do so. Your input, insight, and just any sort of perspective you guys can give to these topics is always well received from us, and we appreciate it whenever you guys give your point of view on things that we talk about. And if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and that I read it and feature it on the show, there's an easy way to do that just by using the Super Chat feature. You can use the Super Chat feature just by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's a fantastic way to support our channel as well. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting, conversational as possible. So again, get involved, click the $, and let us know what's on your mind, guys, on these live shows. So with that being the case now, we can jump into the most recent piece of news today. Aaron Glenn, one of the highly touted coaches over there in Detroit, now a former coach in Detroit, is heading and venturing off into his own avenue, becoming a head coach officially in the NFL. Now he joins Ben Johnson, who was hired by the Chicago Bears. Their defensive line coach, who we're going to get into, Terrell Williams, also is moving on, and now Aaron Glenn joins that group. So Aaron Glenn had a lot of success as the Lions defensive coordinator, and it's been a couple days where the news around Aaron Glenn, and what I was actually going to talk about today, was how the Jets and Aaron Glenn had a meeting, I believe yesterday, if I am correct on that. They had a meeting yesterday, and the overall consensus of everything from that meeting was how the Jets really wanted to get things ironed out and figured out on that day. And according to some of the reports coming out, that the Jets wanted to make sure that Aaron Glenn didn't leave that building without a deal signed, basically, to become the new head coach, right? They felt that confident, and they felt like they could get it done yesterday. And not only that, but it also connected to their general manager position, right? Obviously, where they are still looking for someone to fill that role after Joe Douglas, was dismissed, and they were potentially interviewing or potentially going to hire Lance Newmark. Lance Newmark was someone that we had already talked about on this show, but in relation to the Raiders general manager position, which they already filled out. But we thought that Lance Newmark, who currently is the assistant general manager with the Commanders, we thought that would be a great pairing over in Las Vegas, because we heard that the Raiders were also targeting Ben Johnson. But since Ben Johnson's now in Chicago and Ryan Poles isn't going anywhere, now Lance Newmark is still in connection to a Lions head coach, but this time it's going to be Aaron Glenn, it looks like. And while the Jets officially hired Aaron Glenn as their new head coach, there's no news yet on any sort of general manager news. But that's what the plan was yesterday. And when it was reported that both parties kind of went their separate ways, I kind of felt like, all right, the plan didn't really work as you would have thought, as you had it, planned out in your head, but Um, it didn't necessarily mean that it was going to be, just chalked or anything like that, right? There was still hope, there was still some positive feelings, but there was that little bit of hesitation, at least from me, where I'm thinking, all right, well, if they didn't get it done, then, what is the reason for that? And I thought that because Aaron Glenn reportedly had some other interviews set up for head coaching positions, like with the Saints, another one of his former teams, I thought that was where, this could be headed with the Saints, being interested in Aaron Glenn and wanting him probably to be their new head coach. I thought that he at least was going to give them, the benefit of meeting with them a second time. But before any of that was really developed, he was announced officially as the Jets' new head coach. And I mentioned his relationship in New Orleans. With that being said, Aaron Glenn also has connections to the New York Jets. He played there as well for some time during his playing career, and he was actually a first-round pick by the Jets back in 1994, part of his 15-year career, and now he's back to coaching a team that ended up drafting him. So he was a Pro Bowler there as well, and now he's got the huge responsibility, right, of trying to right the ship after numerous attempts of it kind of looking like it was about to turn the corner, not really finding a quarterback, always struggling with that, thinking you've built up enough support around the rest of the team to kind of just bring in a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, and they thought that it was all going to work out, but obviously the year went how it did, and they really struck out on a lot of these opportunities, and a lot of that, came at the feet of Robert Saleh. He was fired halfway through the season, and that was really the beginning of the end for everything. So getting this new fresh start here with Aaron Glenn and this new opportunity, not just for him, but for the Jets, I am really a big fan of. Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn were the two guys that I was really excited to see where they would end up because of the success that they had in Detroit and how much of a powerhouse that team was. And of course they got great players, but I think with their guidance, I think they were really able to maximize their talents there. And I think that goes underappreciated a good amount of times, right? When you see a very talented team, highly stacked up team, like the Eagles, for example, right? They had almost all those same players, but with different coordinators. And then you bring in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, and now they look like a completely new team. Not to bash the other guys, but it just does make a difference, and it just shows a difference in the type of coordinators, the type of leadership, and the type of game plan you come in. So I was a fan of Ben Johnson getting his job, and Aaron Glenn, same thing. I thought he did a great job maximizing that defense, developing guys in his system, in his scheme, like Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph is another one, Terrion Arnold looks to be a very good player, Jack Campbell, their middle linebacker. They've built this team very well, and I'm sure he's had a very big input into that. And now moving over to New York, you already got a lot of solid pieces there with Quinnen Williams, Quincy Williams, Sauce Gardner, guys like that. Will McDonald, kind of broke out this year. They got some good players in this organization, but obviously the biggest question mark, kind of cloud hanging over this organization is the quarterback position. What are they going to do with Aaron Rodgers? How do they deal with Devontae Adams? Garrett Wilson, there was some reports of him being unsettled potentially. So how do you kind of put out the fire a little bit is going to be one of his first jobs as a head coach. But I just really like him also as a leader of men. Obviously, I don't know him or anything like that, but I think one of the things he said that really stuck with me was that, while he was a defensive guy, he said they're getting, whichever team hired him was going to get a head coach, right? He knew that. It seems like he's well aware of the responsibility of that, and I'm excited to see what he's able to do with this team. Anthony here, does this push Aaron into retirement? Because I don't think he wants to play with a new head coach. I mean, I don't think it does. I think that's just really going to be up to Aaron, and I don't know. Of course, the relationship was icy, obviously, with the organization, and I think really mostly with Woody Johnson and all the stuff that came out around that. But I think Aaron Glenn is capable of convincing him, if, of course, Aaron Glenn wants him, right? If Aaron Glenn, I think, doesn't want him to be their quarterback because maybe he wasn't satisfied with Rodgers' play, or he just feels like they need to go in a different direction. I think that could be something that could also be a possibility. Yeah, I mean, rookie head coach is obviously not the most ideal pairing timeline-wise with Aaron because of the difference there, right? But, I mean, I don't know. I think they'll hash things out. And if I were to guess, I think Aaron would come back for one more year. And it's not like he has an array of, choices, right? I think it's really going to be the Jets or some other non-contending teams. So I think the Jets really give him the best opportunity as well. Eric here, addressing the elephant in the room. Will this really change anything about the Jets? Rodgers controls the plays. He hates motion on the line of scrimmage. Glenn has to prove himself. Yeah, I mean, that'll be also an interesting dynamic because, you're a rookie head coach coming in trying to prove yourself and everything, and Aaron holds that seniority a little bit, right? And I think that's going to be something that they really got to hash out, and I would love to see Aaron Glenn really take control over that. And who his offensive coordinator is going to be huge, and it also goes hand in hand with Aaron, right? Because if he wants Aaron to be his quarterback, then you would like to think he'd have some input into that offensive coordinator, and we'll see how those discussions go, if that's something that both Aarons can agree on, right? I've heard some things about Todd Haley being in contention for their coordinator position, which, I mean, I haven't heard that name in a long time. Last time it was with the Steelers, I believe. So, I don't know. I mean, that's only just one of the many things. And, bringing up Aaron Rodgers is going to be the biggest thing because, obviously, if they don't bring him back, then you got to look at a new quarterback coming in. And really the market isn't one that I'm too thrilled upon, and the Jets aren't really in a spot to really draft one either. So, I mean, if you don't really got one of the top-tier quarterbacks, that really skews your expectations for this team, right? But like I mentioned before, they got a lot of good players, and as long as they could put out those fires a little bit, because right now everything just seemed like a big mess, I think a smoother start and a more relaxed start, off of the season that they just had, I think will tell us a lot. And I'm interested to see what he says, as his first remarks as a head coach. I think that is also kind of giving us a blueprint of what's to come over the next couple of months. So, big news, the Jets finally get a head coach, joining the Patriots, joining the Bears. Now, we'll see what the Jags, the Saints, and the Raiders do now that they are without the two top, or actually the three top choices of the head coaching market. So we'll keep tabs on that. But as we move along, we're not going to move off of coaching too much just because we are going to give some quick updates on the coordinators around the NFL. There was some breaking news around some coordinators being hired in different places and some other rumors around head coaches that I wanted to touch on. So we're not going to go too far off of this topic. Make sure to join us back here after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right. So we're back here on the show, and after, talking over the breaking news around Aaron Glenn coming off of the market and being hired by the New York Jets, there was some other updates surrounding some other coaches around the NFL over the last couple of days. And the first one has to do with the New England Patriots once again. Actually, the first two pieces of news do, because the Patriots made some more news, and apart from hiring Mike Vrabel, obviously, they were looking at their coordinators, right? Because they were moving on from Alex Van Pelt and their defensive coordinator. I forget who it was, unless Gerard Mayo was calling the plays. But basically, with Mike Vrabel coming in, a bunch of new staff was also coming in as well. And now it was recently announced that their offensive coordinator is going to be Josh McDaniels for the third time in the last 25 years. He was previously, the last we saw of Josh McDaniels was with the Las Vegas Raiders, where he was their head coach, and he didn't really last too long there. It was very brief until they parted ways with him about halfway through the season, if I remember correctly, and they moved on to Antonio Pierce, and they had that decent end of the year last year, right, to close out the year, nearly finishing 500, and Antonio Pierce was named the head coach, and now he was fired this year. So Josh McDaniels, after his second stint trying out the head coaching realm, he goes back to being an offensive coordinator and joining Mike Vrabel's staff, really with the massive responsibility of developing Drake May. Eric says Bill comes back as defensive coordinator. Actually, that's the next piece of news that I have. So just hold on that thought for just a second, because I do have news on who their defensive coordinator will be. It won't be Bill Belichick, unfortunately. But it is still exciting because there are a lot of ties. There's a lot of relationships here with Mike Vrabel. Not only is it Josh McDaniels, who spent his first stint with the Patriots while Mike Vrabel was still actually playing during his first time here with the New England Patriots, and then he moved on to be the Broncos head coach for a couple seasons, and then he ended up coming back to Bill Belichick and the Patriots as well. And then again, he built up some momentum. There was a new cycle of hiring in the NFL, and he took the Raiders job most recently, and now he's back with the Patriots once again. And clearly, the relationship around the entire organization, right, with Robert Kraft and the former players being hired, and Mike Vrabel bringing back Josh McDaniels, it is something that feels like it's a major factor in this hiring process. And I think, also for Josh McDaniels to kind of cut him some slack for some people that might not be too eager to see him come back. I think just some coaches are just a lot better being coordinators than head coaches, right? I mean, I immediately think like Josh McDaniels, obviously, Arthur Smith, Jeff Ulbrich a little bit towards the end of last year. Dennis Allen was another one. I think some coaches, just suit the role of coordinator most of all, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, I think that sort of explains also, the hiring of Josh McDaniels once again. And, I mean, I don't mind it overall, but again, I thought Alex Van Pelt did a decent job with Drake May, and, to switch over to another offensive coordinator seems, counterintuitive, right? That's what everybody says you shouldn't do, but I do understand with Mike Vrabel coming in and them starting a new regime over there in New England. I do accept the move, but, they seem to have a lot of confidence in Josh McDaniels to continue the job of developing him. So it's still in the very early stages. So overall, I mean, they got time on their hands. It's not like they got to be, in the conference championship, this upcoming year, like Jaden Daniels is this year. So they got time. They got time to iron things out. And not only did the Patriots make a move in regards to their offensive coordinator, now going back to your question, Eric, on their defensive coordinator, they also went into Detroit's coaching staff to get their new defensive coordinator. They are hiring Terrell Williams as their new DC. He was the Lions defensive line coach this past season, and Terrell Williams has also a connection to Mike Vrabel. Both of them worked together in Tennessee from 2018 to 2023. Mike Vrabel is said to be very fond, has a lot of high praise for Terrell Williams, and he wanted to bring him in to be part of his staff. And now they're together once again in New England, and he is the defensive coordinator now, not just the defensive line coach. But defensive line is clearly something that he has a lot of experience in. You think of the guys that he's worked with, like Jeffrey Simmons, Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil this year, had a nice year for himself. Danico Autry, who is now in Houston, but he was there with Terrell Williams. Mario Edwards, another Texans player now, but was also there in Tennessee. And, all those guys are very solid defensive line players, very sound guys in their specific roles, and all of them make an impact as well. So the fact that Terrell Williams has worked with those guys, it creates even more excitement for the Patriots and getting the best out of guys like Keon White, Godcho, Christian Barmore, those sort of guys for the Patriots, right? It makes it a little bit exciting that he's worked with the level of guys that he's worked with, and now you also have some young, still, exciting players that can benefit from a guy like Terrell Williams. So the Patriots just bang out really the biggest three spots, obviously, on their coaching staff: the head coach, the defensive coordinator, and the offensive coordinator as well. So the Patriots being proactive with their hirings, they're getting through it pretty quickly and pretty effectively. And the last thing, or actually the second to last thing I will mention here, is on the topic of offensive coordinator. Eric, damn, haha, well then, who the hell picks up Bill? I mean, Bill's at UNC, so do the Raiders go and get him? I mean, that's probably the most interesting story I could give you, Eric. Maybe the Raiders go out and get him. Tom Brady there. They're still looking for a head coach. Do you really want to bring in like Mike McCarthy after the year he had, or Robert Saleh? I mean, I don't want to bash them or anything, but it felt like they really wanted Ben Johnson, and now that they can't get him, it feels like they're in a weird spot right now, right? And they got a lot of pressure too, obviously. So maybe the biggest and most intriguing storyline could be like Bill going to Las Vegas, or maybe heck, they get like Deion Sanders or something, right? That's always something that people aren't going to stop talking about. So we'll see. I mean, Bill's got that buyout clause in his contract, so if anybody really wants to go get him, they could go pay UNC that money and try to convince Bill Belichick to join their team. But for right now, he is the UNC head coach, as far as we know. But going back to the NFL a little bit, today ESPN reported that the Buccaneers offensive coordinator Liam Coen has removed himself also from the Jaguars head coaching list to stay in Tampa Bay, and not only stay in Tampa Bay, but he'll also be getting a new contract that'll make him one of the highest paid coordinators in the NFL. And Liam Coen was one of the most intriguing candidates also, to kind of go back to the previous point, right? Because of the progression that I think we continued to see with the Buccaneers, right? After Dave Canales moved on and they had success with him, Liam Coen came over from that McVay sort of tree, and he just picked it up right where they left off, right? Baker Mayfield took another step. He arguably should have made the Pro Bowl, but he still had a great year in this offense. They drafted and developed Bucky Irving at an impressive rate, drafted Jalen McMillan as another exciting player, and overall this offense just finished top 5 in a lot of offensive categories, and you saw that improvement from a year ago, right, where they were 23rd in total offense last year, and they finished 3rd in total offense this year. They were 20th in scoring offense last year, and they finished 4th this year. In rushing offense, they were dead last year, and this year they were top 4. In passing offense, same thing. They finished as a top 3 team in that category, where last year they were 17th. And red zone offense, they were near the bottom as well. They were 30th in red zone offense last year, and this year they were number 4. And third down offense, to close it out, they were 10th last year in third down offense, and now this year they were the best team in terms of third down and converting and being as efficient as possible on third down. All a product and a major contribution from Liam Coen as well. So I thought he did a well enough job to definitely deserve a head coaching opportunity, but I still like him staying there. On top of all else, right, if nothing else really spoke to him, being there and continuing that relationship with Baker and Mike Evans as well, with Jalen McMillan, Bucky Irving, exciting young players, and how they were able to use a multitude of running backs as well, I think is super exciting and a big relief for Bucs fans, right, because they now know they're going to have that stability going into next year as well, and they're only going to get better, right, because you'd like to bring back Chris Godwin. I think that would be huge for them. But in case that he does move on, you have a steady system in there with Liam Coen not going anywhere. So that's pretty much all the updates we have on the coordinators that were hired and, some just the latest news around that. And I'm sure we're going to get more as we move on because things are moving pretty quickly. Teams are picking off coaches one by one, and you don't want to be the last one with just nothing left to speak of, right? You don't want to be the last one with nothing left. So I expected to pick up a little bit more as well as we go into the weekend. But speaking of the weekend, we're obviously going to talk about something surrounding the conference championship games. And in the next segment, we're going to bring up the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs game. Really focusing on the Bills and just asking a simple question. Is this their best chance of beating not only the Chiefs, but making it to a Super Bowl for the first time in Josh Allen's career? Do they have what it takes to do that? We're going to answer that question when we return.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We're back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss some discussion points, basically. Some discussion points on the conference championship games that we have coming up this weekend. Not so much previews, but just because there's a lot of storylines and narratives that you can pick off from both games, we're going to talk about them because there's a lot of interesting things to delve into, obviously surrounding both matchups. There's a lot of history within both matchups as well, and this is one of them, right? Because between the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, they've seen each other plenty of times. Josh Allen has played Patrick Mahomes plenty of times in the regular season and the postseason specifically as well. And this upcoming matchup will be the fourth time Josh Allen squares off against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. But like most know, it's been very one-sided. Very one-sided. Only one side, if anything, up until this moment. Allen is 0-3 in the postseason against Patrick. The AFC Championship game in 2021 and the AFC Divisional Round game last year, both times were played in Kansas City. And last year actually wasn't, right? The Divisional Round over the last few years and in 2021, the AFC Championship game, both of those were played in Kansas City, but last year it was actually in Buffalo, and still really no difference. The Chiefs won all of them, but there was definitely some close moments in those games, right? You think immediately to the overtime game where Josh Allen doesn't even get an opportunity to try and tie the game or try and win it because they lose the coin toss, and obviously Patrick goes down and scores a touchdown after, the Bills took the lead with 13 seconds left. That was brutal, but also I would argue not as brutal as last year where Tyler Bass missed a game-tying field goal, and There was about like a minute 30, a minute 20 left afterwards, but the Chiefs just ran out the clock and they won 27-24 in Buffalo, which was just gut-wrenching, obviously. So there's been a lot of brutal moments, a lot of bad memories for Bills fans and really all the Bills players who still remain on the team. You know, it's really still been the main group of guys like Josh, obviously, Deion Dawkins, Von Miller, Matt Milano thrown in there as well, Ed Oliver, all those guys, really mostly the offensive line as well. It's still been the same group of guys there, and I can't imagine that they're happy about, you know, their record, and they got to be tired of just coming in second place each and every year to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So now it's 2025, and we got another opportunity to see both of these teams. And Josh is having another MVP caliber year. His supporting staff and the guys around him just in general are different to the previous times these two teams have met, and it feels like there's more quantity over like one or two very high quality pieces. It feels like there's more quantity, the quality's more spread out this year more than ever. And a lot of people, you know, didn't pick them at all to start the year, me being one of them, to really do anything this year. We thought there would be a step back. We thought Josh would really struggle to kind of carry this team just all on its own, because we've just seen him have a great relationship and a great, you know, productive relationship with Stephon Diggs all up until, you know, the last year, I guess. But we never really saw Josh in this situation where it was just all about him. And now this year, he has shown us that maturity, that growth, a lot more emphasis on ball security, and just not beating yourselves, right? That was one of the toughest things for him to overcome, and this team, right? Because a lot of the times when we talk about the Chiefs, right, it's always you got to play perfect. All the winning recipes are in the details. You got to win the big moments, and again, you can't just beat yourself, right? Because the Chiefs are almost going to be pretty close to perfect, and not that you also have to be, but just don't get in your own way. Don't have self-inflicting wounds, and keep it as close as possible, and just be okay with taking body shots, right, as a boxing reference, right? Taking body shots, but also dishing some out as well. And I think that's been the biggest difference this year, right? Where in the past you had Gabe Davis, you had Stephon Diggs, and back to the boxing reference, there was a lot of haymakers being thrown. There was a lot of big swings, a lot of misses, but also some that landed, but still you weren't able to completely finish the job, right? It always went to the scorer's card, right? It always went to a decision, and the Bills had never won that decision. And up until this year now, I feel like it's a lot more of body shots. It's a lot more of a calculated approach, right? This upcoming matchup, I feel like it's going to be very methodical, very thought out. Two teams that know each other so well and that are perfectly fine with not taking too many risks, taking calculated risks and measures, and really trying to influence this game as much as possible, really through a lot of the same ways, with their running games, with the spread wealth of a Noah Gray or Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, obviously, Hollywood Brown coming back. And then on the other side, you got Khalil Shakir, Amari Cooper, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, three running backs. I'd even mention, Pacheco and Kareem Hunt as well. The wealth is spread out a lot more across both of these teams. So there's not going to be a lot of big game-changing, just in instant plays as you would with a Stephon Diggs or a Tyreek Hill maybe, but there's going to be a lot more checkdowns, methodical 6-7 play drives that these teams are just going to have to eat in order to get to the end and really make the plays when it matters. And I think that that's one of the main reasons why I would say, yes, this is the Bills' best chance to go out there and actually defeat the Kansas City Chiefs, because of the fact that I feel like this year they're very well stacked up against the Chiefs, for all the reasons that I mentioned before. And it's hard for me to imagine that they're going to get like drastically better, right? Because I feel like now that they have an identity, and of course you can go out and say that they could go out and get like a stud receiver if they wanted to, but I think what they value now more than ever is what they feel comfortable playing in their identity, right? This identity that Joe Brady has built with a lot of heavy personnel, a lot of 6 offensive lineman formations, and running the ball, not having Josh throw for like 3 touchdowns and 400 yards, but it's okay to throw 180 and throw 1 touchdown and run it in with James and Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, right? That's really the kind of identity that they've approached, and I think they've done it with the mindset of obviously getting past Kansas City, because the way they're playing is time of possession, limiting turnovers. They've not lost the turnover battle all year, and just again not getting in the way of their own way. Getting in the way of their own path, basically, right? They want to keep the ball, prevent themselves from losing as much as possible, because they know that the more they keep the ball, the more they control the pace of the game and manage it the best as possible, the less time Patrick has and that Chiefs offense with Andy Reid calling plays has to really make an effect on the game. And it also benefits their defense, because it's not like they're necessarily shutting teams down each and every drive. They do struggle. They do give up points like we saw against the Ravens. And a lot of people would say that the Ravens were the best team out of these two, that they should have won. But, the style, the identity that the Bills now have allowed them to, get past all these expectations, right? Maybe on any other day, 7 out of 10 times, maybe the Ravens win just because they're more talented and they don't make those mistakes. But the Bills are very cognizant that that's what the playoffs are all about, right? Valuing the ball, limiting turnovers, and keeping the ball in your possession as much as possible. And if you can be efficient as they've been in all the positions that they have, it's going to be extremely tough to beat them. And they've built a very good strategy to do that. And I think with the Chiefs also being not necessarily like a weaker Chiefs team, because I think that's kind of like diminishing what they're doing as a team, because it's very impressive as well. They're doing the exact same thing that the Bills are. But you don't so much have to worry about Tyreek Hill changing the game in one instant, right? They don't really got a guy, I guess, yet to do that. You can think of Xavier Worthy, but he's still a rookie. They don't have that big playability just in the change and at the drop of a dime, right? Both of these teams are very slow, very controlling of the pace of the game. So with it being so heavily stacked up, and I just think it's time for the Bills also to kind of get over this hump. I think this is their best opportunity to get one up over Patrick Mahomes. And they already beat him once this year, albeit in Buffalo. It's going to be a lot different in Kansas City. But in that game, they won the turnover battle. They did a good job of working, like I mentioned, the short routes, the intermediate routes, and just being okay with that, right? It's okay just converting first down after first down after first down, because it just tires the other defense out. You don't allow George Karlaftis to get 3 sacks like he did against the Texans. You don't allow Justin Reed to affect the game, Trent McDuffie as well. If you just keep getting first down after first down and doing that in multiple drives, they were very successful with that, and they had multiple 8-play drives that I think just tired the Chiefs defense out, and they prevented all the explosive plays. They had one kind of to Xavier Worthy, but he stepped out of bounds. And like I said, this Chiefs team doesn't have a lot of that this year. So if they can prevent that, it does play more in their favor. And that's what happened in the regular season game. Obviously, it's going to be different now in the playoffs. Of course it is, but I'm sure you can take a bit of that and apply it to your strategy a little bit. And just overall, I just think, again, it's hard for me to see this Bills team to lose a game like this and come back next year with drastic changes, right? Like they're going to be a completely new Bills team. I think that would be a little bit foolish with the amount of success that they've had this year. So it does feel like a now or never, especially when we're talking about, legacies and everything like that. right? Like, Josh Allen's story is going to be told in a lot of these matchups against the proclaimed greatest of all time in Patrick Mahomes. So if you go to 0-4 against Patrick, it gets really tough to kind of establish your legacy further than a divisional round or just getting to the conference championship but not really doing much after that. I think this is something that could also define Josh Allen when it's all said and done, but that's a different discussion, obviously. So in terms of team and the way that the Bills are playing, I think, yes, this is their best opportunity for the way that they've constructed this roster and the way that they're playing nowadays. So we'll see. I'm going to give my prediction later in the week, but for right now, we're going to move on to another topic in regards to two teams that are officially eliminated already in the Lions and the Baltimore Ravens. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about because both of these teams were eliminated earlier than I think most people thought they would be. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about which team has a harder path of returning to this point going further into the future, right? Are the Ravens going to have a tougher time not only coming back to this point, but going further, or are the Lions going to have a tougher time maneuvering through that very competitive NFC? We're going to answer that question after this break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping back into the action now here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue our discussions around several things around the playoffs and going back to this past weekend to the divisional round a little bit. I think it's fair to say it's still hard to fathom how the Lions find themselves already eliminated after earning the number one seed and really not only, getting the number one seed, but getting a franchise record, 15 wins, and in my opinion, being like the most steady team throughout the entirety of the year, because each and every week, I thought you saw it pretty early on first, and then each and every week how the Lions and the way that they're built, the way that they play, especially with those coordinators there, obviously, right, how I felt like they were really like stockpiled in really making a deep run at this. And after that game against the Rams where they won, they just continued to steamroll some teams, just overpower and just outlast the most of their opponents really throughout this year. And it is still hard to think about how they're not even playing anymore, right? And likewise with the Baltimore Ravens, I think you could say a lot of the same things, because being eliminated already the year after you made it to a conference championship and you lost in very dramatic, disappointing fashion. So you go out and get Derrick Henry, and now this year, being a lot better with having another Hall of Famer on your team, you fail to reach where you did last year, when you did get to a conference championship without him. So it does leave you a little bit perplexed as to how that even happened, right? Because it feels like they're overpowered on offense. We saw it against the Steelers multiple times. We saw it against the Texans, where the Texans offense really didn't do anything that game, and the Ravens put up like over 30 points. And they just really put an emphasis on how they wanted to play with Derrick Henry, especially towards the end of the year when you want to play that way, right? Where you want to be playing your best football. And still, the biggest thing with them is that they couldn't get out of their own way, creating turnovers for themselves and giving the ball away, basically. And not that it was solely on, like, say, Lamar's turnovers, because he did put them in a good spot to almost come back in that game, but those hold a lot of weight. So it always feels like you end the season if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan, or especially if you're some of the players, and you think to yourself like we just did this a year ago. Like we were in the same spot a year ago. We did the same mistakes. We were in some of the biggest moments, and we just continue to fall short in these moments. And it has to be extremely just frustrating, obviously. And now looking at both of these teams, the Ravens and the Lions, both will obviously be kicking themselves. But because they're still so talented, because you still have a Dan Campbell or John Harbaugh, Jared Goff, Lamar, great running games, right? And receivers as well, great offensive lines. Getting back to this spot, in order to get some sort of revenge or overcoming this hurdle seems plausible, but as most people, as I've heard around the NFL say, that in the moment, right, it does feel like, yeah, we could just get back there again after such a close loss. We'll be back. But clearly it wasn't that for the Ravens and the Lions, and you don't really know what that means until you suffer something like this, right? You just truly never know. You could be as talented, have such a star-studded roster, but each year in the NFL is so different and so unique that you just never know what the year is going to hold at all, right? There could be injuries, there could be a bunch of other different things that could happen, seedings and just upsets and things like that that you can't really plan for, and how that affects your results in the postseason. And they always say that no roster in the NFL is exactly the same, and that's also playing into this question that I was, thinking about today. With both of them, just from an on-paper standpoint, right? You look at how stacked their offense is, both of them. Their defense is still very good, and the Lions are going to get some guys back. But who's most likely to struggle on their way back to trying to get back not only to this point, but also getting further, right? Finally getting over that hump. And I got a couple pros and cons here for each team before I give my thoughts on it. But Eric says, I feel like Josh is like Peyton Manning and Mahomes is like Brady. Manning always lost until the later years, right? And that kind of, Eric, that plays into the last segment and the segment that I'm talking about now, right? Each and every time that Peyton lost, it felt like it was so close that you're just going to get him back, next year. And sometimes that was what you thought was going to happen, but also you just never really knew. And he had multiple opportunities to get back at Tom, and those teams changed, and I'm sure they approached it each and every year like how not only do we win a Super Bowl, but just how also we beat Tom Brady, right? How do we finally beat him? Because we know that Peyton was good enough. We know that Josh is good enough. It just takes a lot. It just takes a lot more than just being talented and having good players. It takes a whole, just everybody being on the same page. And, that statement, that analogy is very accurate. And, both of those guys had a lot of great battles. Josh and Patrick have had a lot of great battles, but it's been very one-sided. And I think hopefully Josh has the, like I said, the best opportunity to overcome that, at least get one back on Patrick this upcoming Sunday. But to relate it back to the question on the Lions and the Ravens, right? Which team has a harder path to return to this point in time in the playoffs and potentially make it further? Starting off with the Baltimore Ravens. Some of the cons, I guess you could say, is that this team is maybe as close to their ceiling as you would imagine, because there's no one position where I'm thinking like they obviously need to upgrade here. Maybe corner, because the corner opposite of Nate Wiggins or Marlon Humphrey, I forget his first name, but his last name is Stevens. A lot of the times they would be going after him, so maybe that's the only spot that I could think that they need to upgrade there. But linebacker, they're solid. Kyle Van Noy had another great year. Madubuike is still there in the middle. Their offensive line is very good. Obviously, we don't got to talk about Derek or quarterback. They had a Pro Bowl receiver in Zay Flowers. Rashad Bateman played better. Mark Andrews, despite the loss, is still a great tight end. Same thing with Isaiah Likely. So I labeled it as a con because it's hard to imagine that they fell short now, and now that they're just going to get drastically better, because I don't really think that's, kind of possible with them. So it makes you think like this could have been our best chance, right? And they couldn't take advantage of it. Also, you look at the levels of competitions, not just from the teams, but also, actually, I'll start with the teams, right? Because you got the Chiefs, obviously, the Bills, and not just being about one or two great players. We talked about the styles of both of those teams and how very well they're built, how very intentional they are about their styles and whatnot. So you got those two teams. You got the Bengals that are going to be better. The Chargers are, they were disappointing, but they're just not some sort of slouch team, right? They're going to get better. The Broncos, same thing with their exciting rookie quarterback. I'll throw the Steelers in there. Why not? They'll probably be good, challenge you, and then just fall off at the end. The level of competition in the AFC is still very, very tough. Similarly to the Lions a little bit, you have Todd Monken interviewing for some head coaching opportunities. If he were to leave, where does that leave this offense, and how, do you go and move on from him potentially, right? Because he's been a big part of how this offense has played. And if he leaves, now you got that to kind of, deal with. And then you look at the pros of, the situation with the Ravens, and you think they always got a chance with Lamar. Simple as that. When you have one of these rare and very talented quarterbacks, they're always going to have a chance with Lamar. So you have some security there. Zay Flowers just really had his first big, impactful year, and I still think he's only going to get better. And they got a talented defense. Roquan Smith is a big part of that. And, just the organization overall with the Ravens, just some organizations really struggle to make it to this point. And I think the Ravens have really not been that. So you have the organizational stability, the familiarity there, the culture, if you will, there to know that you're capable of coming back, that this team, this organization is going to put you in a good spot to always be in contention. So those are the pros. And Eric says Bills defense will be a disadvantage. They capitalize on teams that push the ball down the field, but that's not Andy Reid's offense. And, that's another great wrinkle to what makes this matchup with Josh and Patrick so interesting, right? Because the offenses are very methodical, like I said, but if you remember to the first matchup in the regular season, it wasn't like a downfield throw, but Patrick tried to extend the play and he overthrew one of his receivers, and Taylor Rapp got an interception in that game. And although it wasn't like a deep down the field throw, it takes something like that, like overextending or overcompensating, thinking that a risk that you think is calculated might be too risky, and you make an ill-advised throw, an ill-advised decision, and things like that. And it might be the only mistake you make all game, but that's the kind of margins we're talking about, right? And that's a great point, Eric. But we'll see where these teams kind of maneuver around that, right? Kind of towing that line between Patrick doing Patrick things, Josh doing Josh things, and just taking the check down. Just check it down. We don't need you to be Superman this play. They're both capable of doing it, but that's sort of like the chess match, right? Who's gonna budge first? Who's gonna give in first to that? It is gonna be fascinating to watch. And on the line side of things, you got some of the negatives like losing Ben Johnson and now Aaron Glenn. Obviously, that's been very stable over their course of being such a dominant team. And now you bring in two new voices. It could be a situation like the Eagles this year, right, with Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore, or it could be like the Eagles a year ago with Brian Johnson and I'm forgetting their defensive coordinator's name, right? But those guys, you bring in two new coordinators, and after Shane Steichen and what's the Cardinals? Gannon. It's his last name's Gannon. Once Gannon and Shane Steichen left the Eagles, you saw how a disappointing year they had the following year. So the Lions are kind of at a risk of doing that, and they just won 15 games, so it's hard to imagine they come back and, are just like undefeated or have like 16 wins, right? It's hard to imagine them playing drastically better, like we mentioned with the Ravens. The level of competition in the NFC feels like it's only getting better with the Buccaneers, with the Falcons, with the Seahawks, with the Packers still there, with the Bears now a little bit with Ben Johnson coming in, and you just got a lot of teams vying for spots, and unfortunately not everybody can make it. So these teams are only getting better and in a way kind of catching up to the Lions, right? If that makes sense. So you have that to worry about. And for the opposite side of things, though, the pros for the Lions as to, avoiding something like this is that, they do have a lot of talent, right? With Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs looks like he's ready to take another step. David Montgomery's there. You can't imagine that you're going to be any more unhealthy than you were this year, right? This year was insane. So you only just got to imagine that you're going to be healthier in the upcoming year, and you got easier quarterbacks to get through, right? No shade to any of them, but none of them are like getting past Lamar or getting past Josh or getting past Patrick. Probably two of them in a single postseason run. The NFC doesn't really have dominant quarterback play like that. So in that regard, it's a little bit easier. And in terms of who I think is going to have a tougher time, I'm going to go with the Ravens because I still find it hard for them to make a Super Bowl. I'd say the Ravens because I think it'd be harder for them to obviously get past Josh and obviously get past Patrick as the biggest reasons, right? But I think it's also going to be easier for the Lions because the injuries were ridiculous, obviously, and I don't see Jared throwing 4 turnovers or just giving the ball away 4 times because that was a huge part of it, right? Because you take away a pick 6, now they only win by 7 points. You don't fumble in the red zone. Maybe you cut that down to 4. You take away another turnover, a throw into the end zone. That could be 3 points right there. And the game's a lot closer. So I think, the 4 turnovers hurt, and I just don't see Jared throwing 3 or 4 again in any sort of situation. And the quarterback play is obviously the biggest part for me. But for Baltimore, I just don't know where they could get drastically better to make a huge difference to the team we saw already, other than experience, right, and the repetition. But getting past Josh and getting past Patrick in one single playoff is going to be extremely tough. And only, the greats like Patrick have gone past Lamar and Josh in multiple postseason runs. So, and then you also throw in Joe Burrow in there as well, and you could maybe face like all 3 potentially, in a way, I'm sure. So it's very stockpiled like that, and it's extremely difficult to beat a bunch of them. That they're going to have an easier time getting back than the Lions, because I think the Lions, which is a bit of an irregularity a little bit with the turnovers and the injuries, I feel like those 2 things specifically aren't going to happen once again. So I'm going to go with the Ravens. I feel like it's going to be tougher for them to get back to this point. But we do got one more segment to talk about in regards to another discussion point just here quickly to end the show. Saquon and Jaden Daniels have been 2 of the most impactful players this season, and we're going to answer a question, right? Who is more capable based on their own skill set, their position, and the supporting team around them? Who is more capable of carrying their team to the Super Bowl on their own? Is Saquon more capable, or is Jaden Daniels more capable of doing that? We're going to answer that question when we return quickly after this. Thank you guys for joining me here back on the Chip Shot Football Podcast for our last segment. A thought that came across my mind today was on the NFC Championship game. Before we get into all the previews and things like that, Sunday's game between the Eagles and the Commanders is going to have a lot of narratives, obviously, and it's going to be a third meeting between both of these teams, a rookie quarterback playing in the conference championship, Saquon's complete domination the entirety of this season, a divisional game just in general, and all the twists and turns that brings. I wanted to focus on Saquon Barkley and Jaden Daniels because they've been, arguably but not really, the two most impactful additions this year to any team from the draft or free agency, obviously. Eric says, but how bad was that drop by Andrews? I mean, what are we talking about? I mean, they have Isaiah Likely, but Zay had a bad fumble last playoffs. That's another great point. Baltimore needs a reliable receiver, and Zay had that bad moment last year, and that was gut-wrenching, right? And then for the exact same thing kind of to happen to Mark Andrews, another one of their reliable guys, it's tough. And I think Zay was extremely missed this postseason because I'm sure he wanted to get back and, kind of avenge himself from that fumble, and having the kind of year that he did, I'm sure he was amped up to prove that. But unfortunately, he got hurt and never got the opportunity. And now, still, you got a guy like Andrews, right? And now he drops the ball like that. And, of course, everyone's going to criticize him because he should be catching that. But, I don't know. The Ravens are cursed or something, dude. How does almost the exact same thing happen back-to-back years? It's crazy. And it's extremely painful, obviously. But I think they got a reliable receiver in Zay. And that's why I would have liked him to have played this postseason. Now, unfortunately, he couldn't do that. But I think they got one. But, I'm sure they would say that Andrews is as reliable as anybody. But he just had the worst moment to have a moment like that. So it's crazy, though. Those two moments you'd have to make those up, right? It feels like. But on, the NFC Championship side of things, right, I mentioned Saquon and Jaden Daniels, and now both of those guys are one game away from getting to their first Super Bowl, right? Jaden Daniels in his first year, and Saquon after years of being with the Giants and, being not necessarily in positions to be in the Super Bowl, but now that he's on the Eagles and they're stacked from head to toe, now he's got an opportunity to make an impact on the biggest stage of them all. Get to that Super Bowl. So, which player is capable of carrying their team on their own to a Super Bowl? And also, kind of intertwined in that question, on the other side of things, who needs a lot more help from their wide receivers or their defense in this situation, right? Who needs more help, and who, in that same breath, is capable of doing it mostly on their own? Does Philly need to pass the ball more at this stage in the playoffs to kind of get over the hump and make it to the Super Bowl? Or maybe Washington needs multiple facets, not only to stop the Eagles' run, but also have big performances from Daimi Brown, Brian Robinson. Do those guys need to have a bigger impact, or is Jaden Daniels able to do it more on his own? And you look at this kind of side-by-side comparison I have here of both of these guys' impact from last year of not being on the team, and now going into this year with Saquon on the team this year for the Eagles. They've averaged more total yards this year. They have averaged more rushing yards this year. They were top 2 in that category. They averaged more points per game this year with Saquon, and their passing yards is the biggest thing, right? Their passing yards is way down at 187 compared to 225 last year. But last year, they had a very bad playoff exit. So, you have to take that into consideration as well. And for the for the Commanders, right, bringing on Jaden Daniels this year and drafting him, they've made a huge difference in where they rank in a lot of the same categories as the Eagles, right? Because in 2023, the Commanders averaged 312 total yards per game, which was as good as 24th in the NFL. And now this year, they're averaging 369 yards, which is 7th in the NFL. They jumped up 17 spots in that category. Then, in terms of rushing yards, they were near the bottom at 27th with averaging 93 rushing yards per game last year. And now this year, with Jaden Daniels, you're all the way up to 3rd in the NFL, averaging 154 yards per game. And in points per game, last year they were 25th, averaging 19 points per game. And now this year, they've upped that by almost 10 points, and they're averaging 28.5 points per game, which is top 5 in the NFL now. So the last thing also is their passing yards. Passing yards, they're about the same, 219 last year to 215 this year, but that's 17th in the NFL nowadays. So I bring that up just to kind of show the impact that Saquon has made from not being on the team last year, obviously, to now being on the Eagles this year, and how that's improved a lot of their statistical categories, but also they've obviously made it further. And for the Commanders, it's a lot more drastic, right? Because you're talking about going from 24th to 7th, from 27th to top 3 in the NFL, from 25th to top 5 in the NFL in points per game. So the Commanders and Jaden Daniels' impact, I think, is more dramatic from last year to this year, while Philadelphia has increased their numbers, but their passing game has clearly gone down. And they didn't really need to make such drastic changes, right? Because when they added Saquon, it felt like this got to be like some sort of a joke. Like, they're already very good, and now they're going to add Saquon. Like, they didn't really need to do that, where the Commanders needed to get a guy like Jaden Daniels in at the quarterback position nonetheless. And they did, and those numbers skyrocketed this year. So, you see a little bit of their impact in those stats, but also on one end, you have Saquon really forcing the Eagles to kind of bypass their passing game, no pun intended, and still, be dominant, not really need to pass the ball too often. Whereas Jaden, on the other hand, has amplified the play of everybody, not just, the run game. He's really made the entire team better, with Terry McLaurin finishing with a career-high 13 receiving touchdowns. Zach Ertz this year had the most receiving yards he's had since 2019. Daimi Brown had a career high in receiving yards and receptions this year as well, with Jaden Daniels. And Brian Robinson also had career highs in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns as well, all because of, mostly Jaden Daniels out there on the field, but, you could incorporate Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn in there as well. So all of that to come to the conclusion that despite people wanting to see Philadelphia pass the ball more, Saquon, we've already seen single-handedly defeat Washington in his first game in Philadelphia, nonetheless, the first time around. And then the second time around in Washington, even though the Commanders won, Saquon ran for 150 and 2 more touchdowns as well. But Jalen Hurts was unable to finish that game. So, that's kind of like an asterisk there, right? So the Commanders, I feel like, to answer the question, I feel like the Commanders need Jaden to be the leading rusher, to throw 5 touchdowns or something like that. And to only win by 3 points, they needed all of that. So I feel like Jaden is going to need more help from the rest of his team to kind of get the win on Championship Sunday, right, in the NFC Championship title game. I feel like Jaden is going to need more help this time around because Jalen's going to play, and because the Eagles already beat the Commanders, right, with just Saquon. So if you do take Saquon away and to answer the question, who can carry their team, Saquon's already done that. He's already beaten the Commanders. So the answer would be Saquon. But also, in this same, sort of area, Jaden is going to need more help from his supporting cast by default, right? Obviously, if Saquon is our answer, Jaden's going to need Zach Ertz to play very well. He's going to need Daimi Brown to have another big game, a lot of big catches against the Eagles and their very talented corners, like he did against Detroit. Terry McLaurin had a fantastic game. The Commanders are going to need that once again. And Brian Robinson, they're going to need something from him as well. Jaden, ideally, you don't want him to be the leading rusher if it can be Brian Robinson. But, I mean, that's an area where Jaden is very comfortable in. He can run the ball, obviously, but you can't just have Brian Robinson really be irrelevant to the impact of the game. You know what I mean? So I think no team has forced Philadelphia to really pass the ball in order to win yet, because the running game with Saquon has proven to be enough in the NFC at least, right, to get past the majority of the teams in the NFC. So I believe Saquon is capable of carrying his team single-handedly more than Jaden Daniels is up until this point, but it's not to say that Jaden, isn't able to keep it close, but we're talking about winning. And if you want to win this game, I think Jaden is going to need those other guys to step up more. Then I would say Saquon needs A.J. Brown to have like 100 receiving yards, or Devontae Smith to have like 7 catches. Saquon doesn't need that. Saquon can just win them this game on their own, in my opinion, right? But, it goes without saying that Jaden has been a huge part of this, and he's gotten them all up until this point. And for this team to make the Super Bowl with a rookie quarterback would be to get past the Eagles and the Lions and the Buccaneers. The top 3 seeds is going to be like one of the most unimaginable things I've seen in a while in the NFL, right? Because everyone talks about the script, right, and everything like that. This would be very off script to happen. So I'm looking forward to seeing this game and giving my predictions probably on Friday. But for right now, that'll be all for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me on the Chip Shot Football Podcast today, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as checking out more of the content on both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel, where you'll see more of the live shows and just more content in general around news around the NFL, reviews, previews, and just more discussions around the league with me, Manny Maradiege, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me, and I'll see you guys back here again tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that